Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. It's time for another whiskey tasting. And today I am doing, I'm not going to taste all three immediately. I'm actually going to split this into a three-part series on older aged whiskeys. And a huge thank you to GlenDronach for sending me some very valuable whiskey and allowing me to do a tasting on this. GlenDronach is one of my favorite, if not my favorite distillery in Scotland. The 12, the 15 are tops on my list, and then we talk about the 18 and the 21, bringing some different flavors to the table. And now I am getting the opportunity to taste a 27, 28, and 29-year-old expression of GlenDronach. And these are just being released in the United States, these three barrels of whiskey that have been bottled. I'm going to talk about each of them in each of these particular videos, and also talk a little bit about older whiskey in general and kind of my perception of things and some considerations you may have in terms of making a purchase of one of these older aged whiskeys. Because I haven't really covered a whiskey older than 21 years old in the interview I did with Rory Glasgow from GlenDronach. And so this is really my opportunity to talk old whiskey and the benefits and whether it's worth spending the amount of money that they're going to ask you to pay to enjoy these whiskeys, and your purpose for drinking them. Why are you drinking them? So we'll talk about that in one of these upcoming episodes as well. I had a really tough time with this one. I sat down, poured the three whiskeys, I let them set for 30 minutes because the rule being you should let it sit in the glass 1 minute for every year that it aged in the cask. I actually challenged myself on that as well, because after I did the initial tasting and shot my initial videos, I realized that I wasn't getting anything that I really could pass on to you as value in terms of tasting notes. So I thought, well, because what I was doing was I was reading the notes that are provided by the distiller, because I knew that these were going to be subtle and it was going to be hard for me to pick some things out. But then they're talking about things like treacle and muscovado sugar and, references that again are a little bit foreign to me. So, things like raisin and creme brulee, I get those. Cocoa, chocolate, yeah, I get those. But some of these other ones, I haven't had a lot of experience with those particular foods. So I sat there and I tasted and I tried to hunt out what these particular flavors were, and I found that I wasn't really finding them. I was kind of finding my own way through these whiskeys. And so I decided last night, I'm just going to pour myself a nice glass of each of them, and then I'm going to mix them up. So I don't know which one's which, and I'm going to just do a blind tasting on these three whiskeys, and I'm going to figure out from the blind tastings. Thankfully all the bottles look the same, and I couldn't really tell which was which, because sometimes you cheat. Even though you don't want to cheat, you look at the bottle and you kind of get what it is. Well, in this particular case, I didn't have that problem. And so waited the 30 minutes again, sat there, relaxed, just investigating these whiskeys, trying to figure out the tasting notes, and had much more success because I wasn't under pressure. I wasn't feeling like I had to reach for something. I just was taking several sips until I finally pulled up some tasting notes that I thought were my tasting notes, not tasting notes from somebody else. So when you find these bottles on the shelves in the US, and like I say, there were 12 barrels that were picked out by Dr. Rachei Barrie, and 3 of those barrels have been bottled up and sent to the United States to different areas, and you can't buy all 3 in the same state. They sent some to this state, some to this state, and some to this state. So if you look down in the notes from these episodes, I will put where these particular whiskeys are available. So, all right, we're going to talk about the first one that I had, because I actually have them now in the line that I did in terms of the blind tasting. And so they're not in chronological order. We're going to bounce around a little bit. This first one is, and these are cask strength, by the way. This is called the Cask Bottling Series Batch 19. And these are cask strength and single cask. So we're going to get different influences from each. When you think about GlenDronach's line, you know, the 12, 15, and 21 are a blend of Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso sherry. Well, guess what? We're going to be drinking sort of like the 18 is, one in isolation. But unlike the 18, this is actually a single barrel whiskey. This is not a marriage of multiple barrels. So on the nose on this one, and this is at 50.8% ABV, by the way, in case you were wondering, and it's 28 years old. This one is 28 years old. This is the 1992 cask version. A bottle of this will set you back $720. All right, out of that, this is out of a, let me see, I got all my notes down here. Pedro Jimenez Puncheon. Now, Puncheon is a barrel that's a little bit bigger than your standard sherry butt. So a larger barrel should be allowing less wood contact than would a smaller barrel when that evaporation happens. And so, you know, it would be interesting to know how much has evaporated out of that barrel to get this 658 bottles that they got out of this. Now, for my reading, it suggests that you could get somewhere around 750 bottles out of one of those barrels. So that's not a lot of whiskey that's evaporated in there. And actually, in reality, you know, with Scotland, the longer it ages, the more that the alcohol evaporates, not the water, because it's so, you know, moist, and it's a moist climate and it's a temperate climate. So it's not as aggressive a place as a Kentucky, where those Pappy Van Winkle barrels, by the time they pull those suckers out, if they've got whiskey in the bottom of them, they're lucky. So it seems that these are retaining their whiskey a whole lot longer, and maybe that will keep us from the issue of this tasting like a hunk of wood. But what's interesting too is that these are not charred American barrels. These are barrels that once held Pedro Jimenez sherry. So on the nose, I get peanuts. There's a bit of a berry smell and a little orange rind that comes in. It does remind me a lot of the GlenDronachs especially the 15. You tend to pull in a little bit more of that kind of warehouse kind of smell that pulls in. Subtle in that. Cheers. That berry continues. Like a strawberry, nice strawberry. There's a cocoa chocolate that develops. Ooh. Then on the sides of the tongue, you get a slight bitterness, like oak tannins coming in. The cherry continues. There's a heat of cinnamon in there. A nice fruity, almost, I want to say, again, berry, very heavy berry flavor. That's surprising. I mean, it really does give me like a strawberry / raspberry kind of an experience. And this is one of those things where I talk about, it's hard to sometimes judge a whiskey the first time you drink it and even the second time you drink it, because You may be in a particular mood. Today I'm relaxed, and today the flavors are coming out a whole lot stronger than they did yesterday. Yesterday was just like, this doesn't really taste like much of anything to me other than it's nice to drink, but it doesn't really have any flavors that are defining themselves. But today, all of a sudden, it's like that berry that I got on the nose hit me on the palate and was clearly evident. It's almost like a jam. I mean, really close to like a strawberry jam by the time it gets towards that finish. So one of the things that I have railed against with older whiskeys, mostly with peated whiskeys and with rye whiskeys, is that from new make to too much time in the barrel, it kind of loses its personality. But the PX cask is giving us a whole lot of interesting notes here that I don't frankly think of when I think of GlenDronach. Yes, it is giving me some of that sherry characteristic, but it has gone away from the like the raisins and that kind of a flavor, and we're really wandering away from the grain now, and this cask is having a lot of interaction with it. And so I think that's where a lot of this fruit is coming from, is from that cask. Now, you can read the tasting notes on the back of the box if you desire to go get this particular whiskey, and you're going to find that my tasting notes are going to be completely different from what Rachei Barrie's tasting notes are. In a way, I'd say you should trust her probably more than you trust me, because she's got a lot of experience in this and has got a much better palate. But you know, and this is the thing in tasting an older whiskey like this, or tasting any whiskey, is that it's sometimes good to hear varied opinions. I'm going to have more rudimentary level tasting notes versus what she has, but maybe I relate to the common man more than somebody who has a deep knowledge and can pull out some very complex flavors that maybe I miss. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was instructive. Got 2 more whiskeys to go, and I'm looking forward to digging in now, especially since my experience with this one greatly improved over what I was experiencing with it yesterday. And maybe opening the bottle and letting some air into the bottle has also opened this whiskey up a bit more. I didn't add any water. I didn't feel like I needed to add any water to it because it was very drinkable as it was. So, but you know, that could change things as well. If you found value in this video, please go ahead and like it. And if you want to see more of these, subscribe. Be a few days and then I will have my next tasting in this series of GlenDronach whiskeys. And until next time, cheers and Slainte. Amazing how opinions change. Berry, a little alcohol, and that cask flavor, just that warehouse cask flavor comes in. That's a very good whiskey. That is a very good whiskey.